Hello and welcome to Chapter 1, taking a computer apart and putting it back together. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go over about approximately 15 minutes of lecture. I will ask you to write down some questions. Not questions, some notes. I'm going to highlight the notes. I want you to type them in a Microsoft Word. And when we're all done with the lecture, you save that and you upload that as homework. Okay, so without further ado, let's start. So in today's lecture, we're going to talk about how to take apart your computer, and pretty much, putting it back together is just doing it the reverse. So what do you need to look at? So the first step that you are going to do is you want to make sure that you are organizing your workplace. Don't just do it any place. Make sure if you are standing on a carpet that when you take things apart, which we'll discuss in a few minutes, that that you don't move around as much. And this is very important as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if the book follows it or not. You label everything, and if you don't want to label it, and if you have your phone, it's probably a good idea is to take pictures on to see how everything and where everything is connected. So you may use your phone, take some snapshots to see where everything is connected before you take anything apart. Okay, so step number 1. So here are some of the tools that you may need. So you may need the sprayer to get rid of the dust, which we'll talk about that, a multimeter, the post card that will give you check some errors, of course, screwdrivers, the pliers. So all of these are different tools. You may not have all of them, but it's definitely, you need this sprayer to get rid of any of the dust that is around, because you don't want to brush it off with your teeth, with your hands. The pliers and the screwdrivers, that is something that you are definitely going to need. All right, so the first thing you need to know before we even go any further, we need to talk about the electrostatic discharge. This is very, very important. Anytime that you are going to work inside the computer and on any electronic board, you need to be discharged. What is the electrostatic discharge? Now, what happened is when you walk, if you have your shoes, let's say made out of rubber, and you walk on carpet, you are going to accumulate static charges on your body. You don't feel it. Now, you don't feel it until you really charged up to 3,000 volts. If you touch a piece of metal, you're going to get discharged. So sometimes if you touch any of these chips that are on the motherboard, you can discharge and you may harm the chip, kill it completely. Over 90% of electronic boards go bad, hardware-wise, is because of poor electrostatic discharge maintenance. So you got to make sure that when you put a wrap in and you attach it to a piece of metal, you are constantly being discharged. So if in case accidentally you touched any of these chips, you are really not discharging any of those static charges onto the board. So here's the first thing that I want you to write down. Write down is the sentence right here. The first sentence of this paragraph. All right? Talking about the discharges. Now, what can accumulate charges? High humidity will accumulate charges. Don't wear polyester clothes, styrofoam cups. Don't let people touch you if you opened up the thing. If you don't have a wrist strap, touch a piece of metal. Maybe the power supply will allow you to do that. So, and don't move around as much, especially if you're on top of a carpet. And polyester clothes also can accumulate a lot of static charges. But it is best, if you are going to be a PC tech, you got to have that wrist strap. All right, you need a can of compressed air. One of the first things you do when you open up a PC, you may have a lot of dust in there. You want to spray all of that out. And every once in a while you need to do that, especially if your desktop is sitting on top of a carpet, and because of vacuuming, a lot of that dirt can get in there and can accumulate on top of these chips, creating like you're dressing up in the middle of the summer when it gets really, really hot. So you need to clean that up. You're creating really You want to make sure that all the dust is cleaned out. And, on the other hand, that also can accumulate a lot of charges. So you need to have that definitely as part of your tool every time you open up the PC. You want to use that compressed air to blow all the dust out. All right. Now, when you open up the case, take a look on the outside. It all depends on what type of tower you have. They may all look differently, but most of them are pretty much have the following on the back of the PC. So let's go over each one of those. I want you to write a sentence for each one of them. And it's probably a good idea to be able to recognize what the pictures are. You don't have to draw the pictures, but at least you should be able to look at them and know that, for example, this is the video graphics array, the VGA port. This connects to the monitor. If the monitor is analog, you need the VGA connection. It's always blue, 15 female port. This is the digital video interface, DVI. So if you have a digital monitor, this is where you should connect to. The high definition multimedia interface, HDMI. This will connect to your TV, or you can connect to other monitor, and it allows you to have video and voice on the same wire. You have the display port. You have a Thunderbolt, 3 ports that transmits video, data, and power. You can have also, of course, your audio ports. This is for your speakers. It could be for your microphone sometimes. You have the SPID. This is the sound ports. And you have, of course, the universal serial port, the universal serial bus port, the USB. You have the 2.0. The 3.0 can give you speeds really up to gigabits per second, which is really nice to have. All right, then you have the external SATA port. This is for external hard drive. Then you have the mouse and the keyboards, right? PS2 ports. Then you have the 9-pin serial ports. This is for older computers, desktops. Then you have the modems. That's also legacy. Not a lot of. This is for dial-ups. And then you have the Ethernet. Most likely that it's in there. Typically, the wireless network ports are not seen, so you probably won't see that there. This is what the Ethernet port. This is really just a loopback plug, just to double check the port to see if it can transmit. You're checking for continuity, to check the cable for continuity. All right, so one of the first things you need to do is also very, very important before you do anything down is, so step number 1, write this down. Back up the data. Everything has to be backed up before you do anything. All right, so step number 1, back up all the data, because you don't know what's going to happen. The worst case is you bring everything back the way it was before. It's just a matter of time. Step number 2, you turn off the power. Never, ever you work inside the computer while the power is on. In fact, it's probably a good idea to unplug it from the wall, because there are some chips that are in there that may hold data, hold power. Step number 3, have a plastic bag or a cup loosely to hold all the screws, because the screws may flow all over the place. And probably in there, step number 3, press and hold down the power button to make sure that you're powered down, and have some place where you can put all your screws in. But it's probably a good idea that as soon as you open up your desktop is to take a picture. All right, step number 5, open the case cover. Okay, you can either pop it out, depending, some of them slide out. You can screw the back. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. And then, it all depends. Make sure that now that you have your wrist strap in, connect it maybe to a piece of metal, right? Maybe to the either anywhere where you can have that alligator clip wrap onto a piece of metal. That means you are constantly being grounded. All right. So, and anyway, never ever touch the motherboard. Don't put your hand on. Only work with whatever you're trying to either remove or install. You don't have to touch anything else, especially what's on the motherboard, the memory chips and the CPU and so on. All right, so taking a look at inside the box, then you have this is the motherboard, right? Here's your power supply. Here's your hard drives. And here's your DVDs, maybe. This is the front of the case. All right. You may have some expansion slots that you may have coming out here. Here's the typical motherboard. You have your conventional PCI slots. So a card will go in here, go into the outside. This is your memory. This is where the power is the motherboard, right? Here's the BIOS battery. Here's your CPU with the fan on the top to suck all the heat out. And these are the ports that are coming out, which we'll see in a few seconds. They're integrated right here. So here are all the integrated ports. Integrated means everything, all the electronics that control all of these ports are part of the motherboard, which is nice. So you got the USB ports, you got everything that we just talked about, the audio ports and so on. All right, here's a typical video cards. Video cards are very expensive, and sometimes they can be more expensive than the CPU itself. Especially if you have a gaming desktop, this is going to be super expensive. I'm talking about, hundreds of dollars. Some of them can go up to thousands of dollars. With lots of memory, they have their own CPU as well. All right, here's your memory. Let me blow this up. This is your memory slots. We'll talk about memory in a different chapter by itself. This is the memory. There are lines that are directly connected to the CPU. Okay, and remember, the more memory you have, the faster your device will, the faster your system will work. Okay, typical drives. You have the hard drives, the larger and the smaller one. Then you got the DVD drive. Okay, here is the skeleton of the box itself. So if you ever go out to purchase a tower, typically you'll get the tower, no motherboard, of course. You just get a power supply with it. Just make sure that the power supply has enough power, enough watts to feed all the different types of components that you are going to be installing later on, including the motherboard, how many drives you're going to have, any external drives or anything like that. All right. You have the dual voltage selector, depending on where you're living, either in Europe or in the United States. 220 or 120, you got to make sure that switch is switched to the correct place. Here's your power supply. And this is where you turn on and turn off the power directly. Okay, moving on. And here's your power supply with all the different types of external cables, right? This is the ATX power supply with the connectors, all the different types of connectors that are out there. All right, so again, please write these down one at a time. The 20-pin one connector, and I want you to be familiar with them because they do come on the A+ certification. The 24-pin connector and so on, right? And we will be trying, and this way you'll find out exactly where the power is in case you need to use a multimeter to measure the power, because sometimes maybe your power supply is not supplying that power. So we'll talk about that when we get to the multimeter, and we'll see how it's being measured. All right, so here's a connector to the motherboard, right? The power, the 4-pin 12-volt. Here's the in-pin connector. And by the way, they fit in one way. So if you try to do it in the reverse, it may not work. All right, so I'm going to stop right here. But before I stop, you have the book. You can click right here, by the way, and click on Read Aloud. That will allow you it will read the whole chapter for you, and you just sit there and listen. So I highly recommend that you do read the book. All right, and we'll continue with this on the next video. But for now, I want you to write down what I asked you to write down and submit that as homework. And I'll see you on the next video.